Hello, hello, hello. This is Adolf Vega, and this is the editor's note before the podcast really begins. So this is kind of like a Frankenstein of a podcast. I originally recorded this, and I did not have a 3D section, because at the moment I watched it, it was in 2D. So I re-watched it, and I edited a 3D section into this podcast. And I also edited in a little subsection where I did see it in Spanish and talk about my brief experiences with the Spanish version. I did mention in the original broadcast that I wanted to see it in Spanish and see what the differences were. And so this is just the added section toward the end. So this has everything. It has the entire movie review. It has a 3D movie review. It has an additional section talking about Spanish, and of course this introductory section here. So this is the complete full podcast of Coco. Everything here. Sorry I couldn't do one like this before, but it is what it is. And that way if you have listened to Coco already, the 2D review, you can listen to this and it has more features. And if you wanted to see the just the 3D section, that's separate. So just giving you options here. So I hope you like this little Frankenstein of a podcast. Alright, thanks. Now on to the regular broadcast.
Let's go watch it in 2D. No, let's go watch it in 3D. But if we watch it in 3D, then is it worth the cost?
Every year, grandkids, cousins, pretty much everyone gets together. Even great-grandma Coco.
Life sounds like... Miguel, eat your food. Here, have some more.
No, gracias. I mean, see?
That's what I thought you said. Dia de los Muertos has begun. It's the one night of the year our ancestors can come visit us.
I thought it might have been one of those made-up things. I was just... But
Tonight is about family.
I am not like the rest of my family. There's something that makes me different. Great-great-grandfather, I want to be a musician, just like you.
All right, who's in there?
I'm sorry.
Welcome to the land of your ancestors.
Miguel?
We're your family. You're skeletons.
You're alive!
Hello, hello, hello. This is Adolf Vega from 3D or 2D.com, and today I'm reviewing Coco. As usual, I'm going to talk about the 3D element first. So I previously recorded a review of Coco, and I did not include a 3D section because when I went to see it, the first screening was in 2D only and in English. Now, I re-watched the movie in Spanish and in 3D. I don't regret watching the movie twice because the different experiences I had between watching it in Spanish and watching it in 3D. Unfortunately, the 3D visuals for the movie are nice, but a minor addition to the movie. During some scenes with lots of crowds, you can clearly distinguish between individuals within the crowd because of the depth-based 3D. For pop-out, there's not much there for it. It's rarely used. It's mostly a non-factor. One example of pop-out 3D is during a scene where a character points his finger outward and toward the camera, and the finger pops out of the screen. You know, if you blink, you miss it. It's just literally for a split second. The 3D overall is just not there, but it's not dramatically different, or it does not dramatically enhance the movie because of it. You know, I literally forgot the 3D was there in this movie for a good part of it. You can call me a little crazy, but I didn't find anything really memorable about the 3D element of this movie. The 3D visuals are pleasant, they're done with care, but ultimately I just don't care. Simply put, 3D is not worthwhile and I do not recommend it. So my final verdict is weak 3D, watch in 2D. Well, on to the movie itself. So Coco is the story of a young boy named Miguel, and he wants to be a musician, specifically a guitar. He lives in Mexico in the 1980s, 90s. It's kind of vague, the time period, but they have VHS tapes, so I'm guessing 80s, 90s. So anyway, he wants to be a musician, but his family is not interested in that lifestyle. His family wants him to continue the family tradition, which is shoemaking. And Miguel decides, or through a series of events, Miguel crosses over to the land of the dead and tries to have an adventure, try to get back to the land of the living. And that's basically the story in a nutshell. It's kind of hard to talk about it without spoiling it, and some of the aspects of this movie are kind of weird, but I did enjoy it. Now, just for disclosure, I am a Hispanic. My ancestry is from Mexico, and I'm aware of the holiday, which is Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead. It is a holiday that most indigenous Mexicans, or Mayan, or people that Aztec, that, indigenous people of Mexico, more or less, they celebrate it more than traditional Mexicans who are Catholic. I remember once before, I asked my grandmother about Dia de los Muertos and why we don't celebrate that, and she basically said, "Es para las brujas," which translates roughly to "it's for witches," which basically means there ain't no Catholic thing about that. And not Christian about it. We're Catholic, I'm Catholic, and Dia de los Muertos in some ways is, I guess, not really against Catholicism. It's just a very different interpretation of the afterlife and death. The reason I mention this is just for sake that I am part of this culture. I do get it. I don't never participated in this, but I am aware. I'm, a generation and a half removed from this, So I know in recent pop culture, Dia de los Muertos have really become more prominent, more bigger, I guess, in popular culture. The previous release of Book of Life, which I already reviewed and I really enjoyed. So this movie, in some ways, have been compared to the Book of Life, and I really feel like they're very different movies. They have similar themes, but different movies. Kind of like how Ants and Bug's Life are both about insects, but they're very different movies. So, good ideas seem to come around multiple times, and this movie is a good idea, based on Dia de los Muertos, which is, it's a holiday where the living once a year, just about, I think it was after Halloween. I think it's November 1st or 2nd. Don't quote me on that. But the living will make little shrines for the dead. And the family members will have little pictures, and they will make their own food and go to the graveyard and honor the dead. And they believe that the dead will come back and eat the food, and they will be able to interact with the family. And that's what this movie is about. Being able to go back and forth between the life of the living and life of the dead. And young Miguel here, to go back all around, he accidentally goes into the life of the living, which is parallel but not directly connected unless it's the Day of the Dead, when people have the right to go back and forth. If you're remembered. That's a big caveat here. If you are forgotten, you're gone. So, the rules of this movie are a little bit strange. Like, they don't just sit down and tell you what's going on sometimes, and it's like, huh? I don't know this culture. I know of it. But there's these little spirit creatures, and it's like, what is that? I don't know anything about that. tell me. And the movie doesn't tell you anything. Just goes on. And that's one of the movie's flaws, is that the movie just kind of goes on. It does not give you time to really explain itself. In some ways, the movie is fast. I feel like it's very kinetic. Like a lot of other animated movies of the recent past, they have been very quick. Always going to the next action scene, always going to the next set piece. Just, I guess the kids these days, they want something fast and they want to keep going and they don't want boring exposition. They want to keep going, the next fun scene. And I get that. It's a kids' movie. It's animated. It's by Pixar. But I kind of would have liked a little more time explaining things. The fact that Miguel goes into the land of the dead, he never feels astonished by that. He never feels amazed or whimsical about this feature, where he even admits that he doesn't really believe in it. So now that it's fascinating, and that they mention a couple times here and there that his family is Christian. You see crosses. You see him doing the sign of the cross, and it's kind of a weird thing because it kind of doesn't make sense to why Christians, why Catholics specifically, it's a weird paradox. I know that's actually part of Mexican culture. It's a weird paradox of understanding the future and respecting the past. So I'll let that one go, but I did notice it. It's like, hey, you can't have Christian stuff with Day of the Dead. They're two opposite ideas, So the movie is a little bit too kinetic for me, a little bit too fast. But when it does slow down, it becomes an excellent movie. So there's many times it does slow down, but I wish it was more. I wish that they really sat down and let you breathe in the grandeur of the situation and the story. So the fact that they're a little bit rushed, I mean, overall, not the story elements, but the just how the movie flows is quite a fast pace. And there is a massive amount of characters here. Now, most of them are kind of frivolous, but it's just the fact that they are frivolous is kind of annoying. I kind of wish that either A, you cut it down, or B, you give them more screen time. One or the other, because there is a huge, Miguel is part of a huge family, which I get, Mexicans and Hispanic have huge families. Part of that is, I'm part of a bigger family too, so it's not that big a problem. But it's there's so many people here, it's hard to keep track. And the movie, in some ways, feels predictable, which is kind of a shame. I mean, it's not completely predictable, but there's definitely many plot points where I was like, you know what's going to happen here? That's going to happen. Oh, it did happen, pretty much like I thought it was. That's kind of a shame. I wish it was a little more creative in the plot points. I mean, they have a creative idea of traveling between the life and the dead, and to be remembered is one of the more interesting aspects of this movie, and memory and family. So I would have liked a little more time with this movie. I thought it emotionally impacted me. I really cried at the end, and I think most people in the theater were crying, and it was a very sweet and tender moment. It was a deserved cry. I kind of saw it coming though, and it kind of blunted it a little bit. And I was like, oh, they're going to do that, aren't they? Yep, they did it. I'm not going to spoil it because I'm just not my style, but still, there's some flaws to this movie, but I did love the animation style. I think it was beautiful. I do love the voice actors. They do a good job of putting Spanish into the movie so it feels more authentic. You don't have to know Spanish to appreciate this. If you do, you get even more out of it, but you'll be fine. It's kind of like I Love Lucy, and how when you have Ricky Ricardo speaking in Spanish, and it doesn't really change the plot, but you definitely, if you know what he's saying, it's really fun. Most of the time, Ricky Ricardo, by the way, he's just kind of cussing. So he would not be allowed to say those things on American TV. But since it's Spanish and the censors don't understand it, they let it happen. So it's just kind of funny to watch I Love Lucy and actually understand Spanish. Just kind of like how in this movie, if you know Spanish, you'll probably get some of it. Now, that being said, I actually really want to watch this movie in Spanish. I do fully understand Spanish and sí hablo español. So I think it would work a little better because I feel like the characters are more made to be in Spanish. Okay, so this is kind of like a little bonus feature for the podcast. So I rewatched the movie for a second time in Spanish. I took my mom to see it, and she primarily speaks Spanish. The screen I went to was in 3D and in Spanish, and it's actually pretty interesting how there's little differences to the movie in Spanish or in English. I know Spanish. I speak Spanish. Si hablo español. Yo soy Adolfo Vega, para servirte. And I am Hispanic heritage, so I kind of feel that movie, takes place in Mexico, has Mexican characters. They occasionally speak Spanish in there anyway, so it just feels more authentic and more real to just go ahead and watch it in Spanish. Obviously, I know Spanish. I understand Spanish. That's different, and my upbringing is Mexican, so I really feel like this movie just works better. If you watch in English, it's totally fine. It really is. You don't really miss out on anything. You're going to occasionally have the Spanish peppered into the movie here and there. But in Spanish, it just resonates better. I don't know how to say it. The best analogy I could think of is the difference between drinking Coca-Cola from the bottle, a Mexican Coca-Cola from the bottle, and Coca-Cola drinking it from an American. So the American version is high fructose corn syrup, and usually in a plastic bottle or a can. And the Mexican Coke is made from real sugar and in a glass bottle. Mexican Coke is better than American Coke. It's a very subtle difference. You can taste the sugar, and somehow drinking out of glass tastes better than out of plastic and or canned aluminum. So it's a very subtle difference, but it just tastes right. It just feels authentic. And that's how I could feel that the difference in Coco being in Spanish and being in English is. It just feels right. It just is more authentic. If you don't understand Spanish, you don't need to see it in Spanish. I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, well, I have to watch anime in Japanese because that's how it was actually originally done. And I don't really see that. I want to listen to it in the tongue that I understand. So if you don't understand Spanish, I don't recommend you seeing it in Spanish. But if you do, I definitely think it's worth it. I think this is a really great dub. And I think it's the same actors, actually, for the most part. And the songs on here in Spanish are just fabulous. Where they were great in English, the songs in Spanish just hit out of the park. So it's a very subtle difference, The subtle difference between Mexican Coke and American Coke is Mexican difference between Spanish Coco and English Coco, but it's just better. So that's just a quick little nod on differences between the Spanish and the English versions of Coco, if you're wondering. But neither here nor there. It's still incredibly enjoyable. Very sweet, very tender, and emotional. Coco is a fantastic movie, and Pixar really hit it out of the park with here on Disney. Great animation, beautiful visuals, great story. Too many characters, but the characters that are there are pretty great. I do wish it was a little bit longer. Just give me a little bit more time to breathe it in. Maybe a little more time establishing the rules of this world or universe. And, cut down the characters a little bit. Make it a little less predictable. But all in all, I still loved it, and I would highly recommend it. As now, I feel like Coco is a 9 out of 10. So, highly recommended. That's going to be it for me. Thanks for listening. Bye.
We may have our differences, but nothing's more important than family. I'm proud we're family!
Go away, you! Go!
It's just Dante.
Never name a street dog. They'll follow you forever. Now, go get my shoe.
Alright, so that's going to wrap up this podcast.
Remember to like, comment, favorite, subscribe, love, whatever. Heart it, do something.
3D or 2D.com can be found on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and SoundCloud. And if you want to send us email, our email address is email3dortwo d@gmail.com. And thank you again for listening. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.